be a disciple, not a teacher. First, right?
Yeah, to be a disciple before you're a teacher.
Be a disciple before you're a teacher. Let's break that down, because we were talking about that before.
Yeah. Well, disciple means to be an active learner, right? So in order to do the thing, you've got to learn how to do the thing.
Right.
So there's a process in which you're an apprentice or you're a disciple before you start stepping into leadership. I think it's important that you're a learner before you're a teacher, right? And I think biblically we can look at Paul and Timothy. You know, Paul took Timothy under his wing and called him the son in the faith, but there came a point when Timothy was ready to start leading the church of Ephesus and start leading the churches, right? And Paul left that leadership under his guardianship. But before that happened, Timothy traveled with Paul. He learned from Paul. He ate from Paul. So I think it's important before we step into a Paul role that we are in a Timothy role.
Yeah.
And the things that we want to do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so, like, okay, people nowadays, right? We were talking about it before, but I think it's good that we actually break this down. People nowadays are like jumping into that role prematurely, right? And so I guess when do you know you're ready to like actually start teaching others? And then like, I guess, what are the steps they should follow to like do that?
Okay, so I think there's a process in which I think it takes a lot of humility in that process. You got to be humble. I think there's a process in which you're learning the in and outs of whatever that thing is that you want to do or that you want to be a leader in. Whatever that is, you have to learn the in and outs because you don't know what you don't know. Right? So you have to have a process in which you're able to fail in that student role.
Exactly.
Because you're going to, right? If you're pursuing something, you want to be good at something, failure comes with that process, right? So if you're able to be in an environment where you're a student, where it's almost expected a little bit that you're going to fail, and you have wisdom and leadership to help guide you through that, right? I think that's important because you don't know what you don't know. So having wise leadership around you to help you navigate that process is very helpful, right? And I think we do ourselves a disservice by skipping that process and just going into leadership or teaching before we go through that process. Because if I don't know what I don't know and I'm teaching, then there may be a situation where I'm guiding someone in the wrong direction because I haven't been there and I haven't done it before.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I was just going to ask, like, so why do you think so many people are going into these leadership roles prematurely?
Patience, lack of patience. I think we live in a world where everything's an instant gratification. I post something on the internet, likes, comments, instant gratification. Yeah, so I think that trickles down to the world that we live in where, I mean, everything's instant. If I want food, I go on DoorDash. I click it, I can have the food, right? If I want to feel better about myself, I can post on social media and get affirmed right away. I can post my opinion on Facebook or the internet or whatever it is, and there's somebody out there that's going to hear that and affirm that, whether it's true or not, right? So I think there's a lack of patience and a lack of humility if we're rushing into that role, because I think we have to acknowledge that there's a learning process in whatever we do, and that takes a lot of patience, and in order to have patience we have to have humility.
Yeah, no, for sure. You gave an example, like if someone jumps into leadership too soon, they could lead someone astray. What does that look like at scale, right? So that's just like an example of a personal connection. But at scale, when people are in these roles, because you see it all over the internet, what does that look like?
Well, I think personally in my life, I run a wrestling gym. So there is, because I've been in the wrestling business, coaching for over 10 years at this point, there are things that I can see before they happen, and that helps my business that I have now be successful, right? I've dealt with parents, right? So sometimes when a parent comes in, I can tell right away how that parent's going to be in the gym, right? Sometimes, like I think in youth sports, you have parents that are helicopter parents that coach their kids, right? And I think in my youth, right, when I was first starting to coach, I'd see a parent like that and I would immediately maybe reprimand them, right, in front of people or call it out. And in my years of understanding why parents do that sometimes, right, I can see it happening before it happens sometimes, and now I can understand why it's happening, and I can better kind of navigate that situation where that kid will stick around. Because what I've experienced in the past is sometimes when you acknowledge a helicopter parent in the wrong way, you lose the kid, because kids don't leave teams, parents do. So I think it's creating a relationship with the parent and understanding why they're acting the way they act, right? And sometimes that's a hard conversation, but it's conversations that can be behind closed doors with grace. I think it's seeking to understand and not judge. Right. And I think when you're young and you're excited about something, it's got to be your way. Right. And that's a good thing, where you're ready to blow down walls and you're ready to make things happen and shake the room. But sometimes the ends don't justify the means when it comes to that stuff, right? Where if you are a little bit more seasoned, you can navigate some of that stuff with a little bit more wisdom, and the result is better.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that's a good example. Do you feel like you jumped into the leadership role at the right time, or do you think you maybe jumped in too soon? And if so, like, what do you feel like you did to prepare, or how you could have prepared better?
Yeah, I think I'm very thankful that I had good toolage in the process of having my own gym. I was, even in as far back as high school, I would stay after my high school practice and I would help with the youth team. And I remember I was a freshman in high school, and the coach of the youth program, we were at state, and he goes, "Hey, we've got a youth tournament tomorrow. Anybody that wants to go can go and help coach. Can anyone come help coach?" And I raised my hand right away, and I was like, "I'll help coach."
Nice.
But I didn't realize I was a freshman that really didn't know too much, right? So he was kind of like, "Nah, I don't know if you should coach. I think you should come to practice and see what this looks like before I take you to tournaments and start coaching," right?
Yeah.
So I remember that was a huge wake-up call of like, oh, this person is acknowledging that I'm not ready.
Right.
Even though I'm excited and I want to be there coaching in the corner, I'm just not ready.
The perfect example.
Right? So from that kind of, I took that into the things that I did as I grew in my wrestling career. I started getting into coaching. I started finding spaces where I could learn and I could be the student, right? Even, like observing my coach when I was wrestling internationally, watching how he would coach, how he would navigate with the coaches, things like that, right? And when I moved to Georgia, I got lucky where I got to, I took an assistant coaching job at a college, and I remember we were doing a summer camp, and I was like super excited, and I was like, okay, tomorrow's my day, right? I'm going to do everything. I'm going to show the technique. And he, the head coach, grabbed me and he goes, "Hey, remember, you're the student right now. Remember, you've never been a coach before. You got to learn how these camps go, what the purpose of this. So I want you to watch and observe and learn. And tomorrow, sure, you're going to do some stuff, but I'm still going to, I need you to be humble and let me guide you in those things," right? So I've always put myself in positions where I was the student, and I was able, thankfully, to take that criticism with a good heart and understand that it was not bad criticism, it was building criticism, right? And then I was at a wrestling club for a good 4 years where I trained under one of the best coaches in the state, and he had been having a successful club for 15 years. And I jumped in, and I was kind of the right-hand man when it came to the club. I was the one going to the tournaments, but I only ran practice 1 day a week, and the rest of those days I got to watch him run practice. And sure, I was there wrestling with the kids, and I got to do coaching on my own, but I got to see how he structured practice, how he motivated the kids, how the business side of that club stuff worked outside of coaching. And then when that club went away, I got to step into a role where I was the head wrestling. I was the club president for a rec program. So I got to be right-hand man for an elite club. And then that prepared me for a leadership position in a rec environment where I was actually creating the program, right? Where I was creating the logo for the program. How are we going to market? How are we going to hire coaches? How are we going to get into the schools to market the program? And what does practice look like for the beginners? What does practice look like for the elementary, for the middle school? And because I had been at the academy, I was prepared to put that stuff together. But even in that situation, it wasn't my own business. It was a rec program. It was a park district program associated with a high school. So there was a lot of learning that had to be done there with actually I'm the point of contact for the parents. So now before I got there, if I didn't like a parent or someone was talking weird to me, I could push that parent to leadership. But that was a situation where I was the leadership, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually had assistant coaches have disagreements with parents and have to push that parent to me. So now I'm the point of contact, right? If I hadn't been at the wrestling academy, I wouldn't have been ready for my position at Brookwood, right? If I wasn't in that short coaching role at the college, I wouldn't have been ready for the academy, right? And because I was at that role in Brookwood, now that I have Angry Peach Wrestling Center, I have been fully prepared to step into my own and make that my own, because I spent 10 years learning what this looked like at each level, and was able to take coaching and leadership. I had no idea how to manage a club account with the money and things like that until I got to Brookwood. Yeah. I had to learn all the back end stuff when it came to that. So now I've got my own business. I've done this for 10 years. So I'm not a young, hungry, fiery guy that's just ready to take over the world with my wrestling gym. I'm a seasoned, young, hungry, fiery guy that has been here, done this. It's not my first time putting together programs like this. It's not my first time navigating parents. It's not my first time navigating money, budgeting for a club. So now I'm actually getting to step into a role in which I've done it before, and now I can put my own flavor on it, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's good.
Yeah, it's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Be a disciple before a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You got to pay your dues.
Yeah.
You got to pay your dues. I think that's a good spot to end it on, right into the point.
Yeah, you got to pay your dues. Yeah, you got to
all lines of business, for sure.
Yeah.
And when it comes to anything.
Yeah, and everything you do, you have to pay your dues.
Yeah, exactly.
Because without everything, you built the foundation, right, in which you can now open a successful wrestling gym fast, It's you had to go through that process.
Yeah, I think a fool rushes in, right? And if you accept wisdom and be humble, then eventually you'll be counted as among the wise, right? But in order to be among the wise, you have to be able to take teaching, take coaching, take criticism, and not be the guy for a little bit, and learn how to be the guy so that you're prepared to be the guy.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. I've been there a million times. You just try to be the man. I remember when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, I was just tearing people up as a white belt because I wrestled. And there's this guy there, Dylan. He's a brown belt, and he's shorter than me, short, chubby, and he would tap me, and then he would give me advice, and I'd never listen to it because I'm well, me and you are being competitive. I'm a white belt, you're a brown belt. And then eventually, I just realized one day, wait, this guy taps you. You never tap him. You need to learn from him and be a student. And, that was a huge eye-opener for me. And then I started listening to him, and I started applying it, and, I'm more athletic than him. I'll say it. And it works extremely well for me. because like of genetics and everything, you know, but that learning curve was so much steeper because I didn't take his advice off the bat. I was too stubborn. Like I had to learn the hard way. So I think it's super important to like learn that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think I see it in coaching all the time when I'm coaching athletes. You got to be coachable.
Yeah.
And everything
for sure.
that you do, you got to be coachable. And in order to be coachable, you have to be coached. You have to be willing to be coached. And or if you're someone that is like putting yourself in leadership right away, you're basically saying I'm not coachable because I know how to do it my way and it's gonna work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is good when it's controlled and bottled correctly. But when it's centered in ego, because if you're not coachable, you have an ego problem.
Yep.
Right. And it's like ego, I'm gonna do it my way. Doesn't matter how anybody else did it. I'm just going to do it my way, and I'm going to change the game. Well, some games are older than you are, and some things are successful because they work, right? And you got to learn that some things don't need to be changed, that some things just work because they work, I guess, right? So if we can be humble and accept the fact that we need to learn, we need to coach, be a disciple, and be discipled, seek discipleship, then what happens is we start to learn the in and outs of whatever it looks like, what we want to do. And now we can take that hunger, that passion, that ability to shake the room and to change the game. Now we can do it in a calculated way, but it's rooted in humility. So it's a good confidence rather than a blind confidence.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, no matter where you're applying this, like if it's the market, if it's the mat, like you're going to get feedback and you're going to know that your way is not the right way, like over a long enough period of time, or acceleration through like, you know, skill levels and stuff like that, whether it's belts or better tournaments or higher level business. The market is going to tell you essentially where your skill level's at and where you need to take pointers from.
Yeah, I think I view my life in a biblical lens. So when I'm looking at things like this, I look at what does the Bible say about this process. There's a verse in Leviticus where God commands the Israelites when they plant a plant to let it grow and to not pick the fruit of the plant for 4 years. That the plant needs to feed itself in its soil so that the roots can grow strong and that the plant can start developing its best fruit, its most mature fruit, before they start picking from it, right? And I think we see that with Jesus. Jesus didn't start his ministry at 12 years old, at 15 years old. He was God. He started his ministry when he was 30.
Yeah.
So there's a process there that Jesus, being fully man, also had to go through this humility of being discipled in a way, right? He had to gain this certain type of wisdom as a man before he could start his ministry, right? And that's God, right? And then the disciples, they walked with Jesus for 3.5 years before they got commissioned to go out. So Jesus didn't choose them and just say, okay, hey, go start making disciples. They walked with Jesus. They learned with Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They followed Jesus for 3.5 years before they started their ministries, right? You know, you look at Paul. Paul got saved, and he went straight to the synagogues and told his testimony, but then he went into the wilderness, you know, for 3.5 years before he started his true ministry work as being a missionary, and he wrote majority of the New Testament, right? But it took 3.5 years of him learning and being personally discipled by the Holy Spirit before he could go do that, right? So I think if we look at that, these biblical examples, we need to apply those things to our life and say, okay, if I'm starting a new venture, if I feel like God is commissioning me to start a business, or he's commissioning me to go into a role where I'm going to be in leadership, in ministry, or in mentorship, or whatever it looks like, there's got to be that 3-year growing period, right? That process in which you learn what that looks like from somebody that has been there before, and that's valuable, and that's wisdom. You know, biblically, that's wisdom. So I like to kind of like hang on that a little bit, where it's valuable. And I think if we we're fooling ourselves if we think we can bypass that process and just go straight into a leadership role and do it well. Right? There's a discipleship process that has to happen. You know, even in our salvation, there's a sanctification. Sanctification is a lifelong process to becoming like Jesus, right? And it's a daily thing where we're being discipled by the Holy Spirit. We're being